Welcome to Black and White, Why and How. This video is a recording of a presentation I made for the Coral Springs Camera Club on November 15th, 2022. If it's helpful to you, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and leaving a comment. And now to the video.
Talking about black and white photography tonight, so it's over to you. Thank you for being with us again.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure, Mervyn, to be back with your group again. And I'm just going to share my screen. And I'll probably have to do that a couple of times tonight. So I think you should be seeing my title screen. Is that what you got there?
Correct. Black and white, why and how.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, so it's lovely to be back with you. I think that black and white, it's the why of black and white that is maybe more difficult than the how of black and white. We're going to talk about both tonight, but I think you'll find that the how is fairly simple, although I'm always surprised with how many people don't understand the basics of black and white. So we're going to get into that tonight. So as always, when I give a talk, I like to invite you to take whatever you can use from the presentation. And if there's anything in it that just doesn't fit with your style or your vision or your aesthetic, just set that aside. You asked where Vancouver Island is. I am a long way from you folks. I am immediately west of Vancouver. And Vancouver Island is a 300-mile long island. Basically, if you know Seattle, it's northwest of Seattle. We just call it paradise because it's a pretty beautiful place. But let's get on to black and white. I think there's, decisions. How do we decide whether we keep our image in color or convert it to black and white? Well, I'm old enough that years ago when I got started in photography, black and white was the only option if you wanted to actually do any of your own processing and developing in the darkroom and so forth. And so I started with that in my late teens because there was a black and white darkroom available to me in the university residence where I was living. And there were some guys around there who were quite happy to teach me how to load film and develop it and make prints. And I fell in love with that process. So my roots are in black and white. I think some subjects lend themselves to black and white better than others, and we're going to talk about what those are tonight and some principles around that. Most often, I know before I even click the shutter whether I'm aiming for black and white or color, but not always. Sometimes I make that decision afterwards, so there's some variety. Now, the other day, I saw a quote from a well-known photography teacher on the internet who said, black and white photography automatically creates an emotional connection. And my response to that is, I think that's a ridiculous statement. I think you often do have more capacity to convey emotion with black and white because you have much more creative latitude when you're working in black and white. Often I do find that black and white is more emotionally compelling than color, but it takes intention and it takes vision in choosing your subject matter, composing the shot, and then processing it afterwards. And, isn't that true in pretty much all photography? It's vision and skill that results in great black and white images. There's nothing automatic about it. You might get a strong image or two just through luck, but to do it consistently, you've got to have the vision and skill, whether it's black and white or color. To suggest that you can just grab a shot, take the color away, and automatically have an emotionally powerful image is just ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. So I always shoot in RAW so that I have all the data that my camera can give me. I didn't spend money on a good camera to throw away half the data that it's capable of giving me. So I want all that data. And that gives me the maximum freedom to create an interpretation when I go to black and white that I like. So this is an example of where I did not know whether I wanted black and white or color when I started off, but it almost doesn't matter because I'm going to capture the raw file anyway. So this is what it looked like in color. And I thought, well, let's see, the light is nice. Let's see what it looks like in black and white. And I actually kind of like these equally. I think there's a lot of personal taste involved in whether you want to go black and white or color. And, I have I have a friend who loves color and she almost never converts to black and white. I probably do maybe now 2/3 black and white, 1/3 color, but it depends on my subject. There's very little color on this black leather jacket. There's just a bit of bronze on the snaps and the zipper. So I converted it to black and white. And I didn't care for the coldness that came through in a pure black and white version of this. That's not the emotion that I have when I look at the jacket. This jacket belonged to my late husband who passed 15 years ago. And I have very warm, loving memories of laying my cheek against that when I'd give him a hug when he got home from work. So this coldness didn't fit for me with my vision for what I was trying to say. And so in this case, I added a tone to it, a brown tone. You can call this color grading or you can call it split toning, but adding that brown tone added kind of a feeling of more warmth and intimacy. And that was more what my vision was. So this is no longer a black and white image, but it is a monochrome image. And sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, and you'll probably hear me do that tonight. That isn't really relevant unless you're putting a print or an image into a competition. There are black and white competitions that allow monochrome, allow some tinting like this, and there are other black and white competitions that do not, and your image has to be just black, white, and gray with no tints. So if you're entering a competition, make sure you read the brief and you know what you're doing. If you add more than one color of tint, then it's no longer monochrome. Mono means one, chrome means color. You can only add one color and have it still be monochrome. I saw this leaf laying on the sidewalk as I was having a conversation with a friend last autumn, and I was so pulled to this leaf that I had to interrupt our conversation and to say, I got to pick this leaf up before the wind blows it away because I need to photograph it. She understands I'm a photographer, so that was fine. I was drawn really to the color and also the texture. And so I did the developing in color, but then I also converted it to black and white. And I think here, this is a matter of personal taste. I like them both, but in this case, I lean towards the color. I think there's something about the goldenness that adds to what I felt about the leaf and what I wanted to convey to my viewer. On the other hand, here I did know exactly what I wanted. I knew I wanted monochrome for this because when I saw this leaf hanging on the fence all by itself, what struck me was a feeling of starkness and kind of loneliness. And the color wasn't all that vibrant to start with because it's the back of the leaf, not the front. And the color really wasn't important to what I was trying to convey. In fact, it got in the way because red doesn't say stark to me. And so this is much more stark. This one is a pure black and white with no tinting. I could even add a little bit of a blue tint to add to a feeling of coldness, but I think this says what I wanted it to say. So why did I make this one monochrome? You look at this photograph, there's some nice light, and we always want that in our photographs, but I think it stands out even more in black and white. I really wanted my viewer's eye to go to the area here where the little girl's hands are touching the horse. To me, that was the point of the photograph, that point of contact and connection between the two. And when I shot it in color, as I always do, there was a lot of distraction that was going to take my viewer's eye away from this point that I wanted them to look at. You know, warm colors we know draw attention. So the pink in her hair and the red on the ribbons are particularly going to draw attention. We know saturation draws the eye, and the blues in the ribbon are quite saturated, and the purple and the blue on her hat. And so turning it to black and white took away that distraction and helped the viewer to see the point of why I took this photograph. It also really makes the textures stand out. If you look at the textures there and then look here, they just don't draw your attention the same way because the color grabs your attention first. Here, I wanted simplicity. And I knew it was monochrome I wanted when I shot this, but again, capturing the color in the raw file. What drew me to this subject was lines and triangles. There's this wonderful implied triangle among the three blossoms. There's another triangle here with the branches. And then there's another implied triangle with the slope of the vase. And then the lines of the blind in the back. So that's what I wanted to capture. And the color really wasn't important. It in fact, again, distracted away from what really drew me to take the photograph. I'm not sure whether this is a true monochrome photograph or not now. I think the shadows and highlights may be toned with different colors, slightly different colors. I did this in Nick Silver Effects, which is a wonderful plugin. But if I were competing with this image, I would create it like this, and then I would desaturate it completely in Lightroom and then color grade in Lightroom with one hue to make sure I didn't get disqualified. If there was any perception that there might be two colors in there, I could be disqualified in the competition. So I'm careful about that. When I saw this tulip like this, it made me think of the old 1940s and 1950s Hollywood glamour portraits. So it's got a kind of a flirty feeling to me, and yet that Hollywood feeling as well. So I wanted to create that kind of feeling, and that meant monochrome and a soft glow and some added grain. If you think back to the old movie starlet pictures of the 40s and 50s, they had a little bit of soft focus, they had grain, they were often sort of high key like this, not always. And that was the feeling that I wanted to get. And including color took away from that feeling for me. Somebody said, don't shoot what it looks like, shoot what it feels like. And that is very much my approach to photography. Ansel Adams talked, of course, about pre-visualization. So ask yourself when you're taking a photograph, what am I drawn to what am I drawn to in this subject? And how do I feel with this subject? And then try to show that with your image. And you can use post-processing to support that vision. The minute I laid eyes on this tulip, I knew I wanted black and white. Because what pulled me in when I looked at this and I thought, okay, what am I drawn to specifically? It was the curves and the light on it. It wasn't the color. For you, maybe it's color, and that's fine. But for me, I knew that what I liked was those curves, and it has kind of a sexy feel, sort of a sensual kind of flirty feeling to it. And so I lit it with a flash, somewhat diffused to the left of the subject. And this was what I had pre-visualized in my head. This is what I wanted. I was very clear that I wanted to showcase those curves and the light. And I was very happy with the result. So when we think about composing for black and white, maybe you've never done black and white before and you decide you're going to give it a try. Well, you want to try to choose subjects where color isn't the main point of the image, obviously, or at least it doesn't help convey your vision. And then you want to look for images where texture, line, shape, form, pattern, or light are really the point of the image. And this is a great opportunity with you having a competition coming up around patterns for you to play with black and white, because sometimes patterns stand out better in black and white. You can set the live view on your camera for black and white, still shooting raw, but setting live view to show you what it would look like in black and white. And that's not the final word on what it would look like in black and white, because you have a lot of creative options for making tones lighter or darker when you process, but it'll give you an idea. Light is really paramount, and it's even more important in black and white because it helps define the textures and the forms. My last point here about your image is simple without a lot of detail throughout the frame. An example would be, I think forests are often not good candidates for black and white. Now, I've said that, but at the same time, I'm going to show you an exception. And if you know Ansel Adams' work, which I expect you do, you know that he did gorgeous black and whites of birch and aspen forests. So there are exceptions, and I think it comes down to whether there is a clear center of interest. So here's an example. This is a forest very close to where I live, about 5 minutes away. And it has a center of interest. What drew me to take the photograph was I was looking at the texture and the contrast on those trunks. It doesn't stand out terribly well in color, but it's really interesting patterns on those tree trunks. And so I wanted that to stand out because that's what drew me. And this is the image that I ended up with. This is what I pre-visualized. So before you take any photograph, stop and ask yourself why you want to take a photograph of that particular subject and get as specific as you can. And if color isn't one of the things that drew you to make the picture, consider black and white as a possibility. Here's a good example of where lines are the predominant feature of the image. There's the lines on the platform of the railway station and then the lines along the train. We've got a nice vanishing point. Color really wasn't what drew me to take this photograph. It was those lines. And of course, there's some wonderful texture on that side of that train too. And black and white showed that up better. The color picture is fine, but color isn't the point. And so you don't notice the texture and the lines as much because the color is demanding your attention as well. And you might notice here in this window, this is quite distracting. I think there's yellow leaves reflected in the window. And we know that yellow is one of those colors that draws the eye. When I turn it to black and white, I lose that completely. You don't even notice that window reflection so much. So I think in this case, for me, and I need to say that for me, because you may feel differently, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just giving you some alternate ways of thinking about things and looking at them. I removed the shed and the sign on the left-hand edge, and by taking away the color, the texture and the lines just stand out better. Strong shapes or geometry can make strong monochrome images. So here in this example, we have texture. It's an adobe wall in New Mexico. We have geometry with all those rectangles. We've got light and shadow, which reveals the form and gives the image some depth. And I think that works much better in black and white than in color. You most often do see architectural photography in black and white. And I think that's because architectural photography is usually about the geometry rather than the color of the buildings. When you see spiral staircases, they're almost always in monochrome, at least the ones I've seen, because it's the geometry that we want to emphasize. And here in this image, we also have the repeating pattern of those spindles as they go up the staircase. You can find patterns in nature too. The top image was taken in the Alberta Badlands at Drumheller, and the bottom image was taken in the Imperial Dunes in the southeastern corner of California. In both cases, you've got patterns, and if you leave the color in, then that takes away from the patterns, in my opinion. And so I knew with both of these that I wanted a black and white image. There's lots of interest here in this image, and color might be fine, particularly since these gears were all kind of roughly the same color, kind of rusty looking. But we really don't need the color. The light on this is quite lovely, and the texture and the shapes and the forms are the point of the image. They stand alone without the color. Here we've got beautiful light that emphasizes the forms and the curves and the textures. And I love calla lilies. And to me, they're not about color. They're about their forms and their curves. And so I almost always shoot my calla lilies in black and white. Great light can make even mundane subjects beautiful. You know, I don't know any of you that would pay good money to go on an outing to shoot a brick staircase. I wouldn't. But I was sitting in a restaurant one day having breakfast with my husband, and I glanced out the window and saw this, and I said, whoa, I gotta go, hang on, I'll be right back. And grabbed my camera and went outside and got this shot. And I just love the textures, the way the light is falling and the repeating patterns there. And in this image, the light creates lines and pattern. I was sitting in a workshop and there was light coming through blinds and I could not wait for the break. I could hardly stand it. As soon as they called for a break, I grabbed my camera, went, got this picture because the lines and the light and shadow were quite compelling to me. Both of these images have strong contrast and they have a good range of tones in them. And this is an image I took just a few miles up the island from where I live. Here we have beautiful light patterns on the water that lead the eye into the frame, right from the front of the picture, right through here in this kind of S curve. The light brings us in. We've got contrast with the land because the pine forest is so dark. We've got shapes. We've got this rectangle here at the bottom of the water. And then we've got a whole bunch of triangles here. The land forms implied triangles on both sides. The sails are triangular. The three boats form a triangle. So the geometry of the image is strong. And by taking away the color, we notice more of that. I was walking along the beach here. We have some sandy beaches, but we also have some rocky beaches. And I was walking along one day and noticed this. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. It doesn't do a thing for me in color, but I had this vision that I could make that crab shell really stand out. And so I converted it to black and white. And here the graphic shape really comes through. It's quite stark. I could have darkened the tones in the color and let the lighter tones carry the show, but in the color version, it just looked clunky and artificial. In the black and white, I think it works quite well. Now, a lot of people don't shoot flowers in black and white, but I do. I find that, yes, I enjoy the color of flowers, but I also really enjoy the forms and the way the light falls on flowers. So very often I'll take the color away so that those things can stand out a little better. So here we have beautiful light and curves. It's a soft light. I believe these two were shot with window light. The arrangement of the blossoms gives us a feeling of intimacy and connection. There's a sense of relationship between the two. Color would have changed the feeling in these pictures. So have a look at these ones, and then I'm going to show you the color versions. And I think you'll see that it's quite a different feeling. Very, very different here. The color just grabs all the attention, and you hardly notice the light and so forth that we had. Go back to the black and white. The light stands out more, and the curves even stand out more, I think. Again, these two have a feeling of relationship. And because calla lilies aren't about color for me, I've turned them monochrome because I know what I love about calla lilies is curve and form. So if color's not it, leave it out. Often having light on part of your subject rather than all of the subject can create a lot more interest. And so here I've used side light to bring out the texture and the form. And again, I think color would distract from the drama of this. More and more, I'm trying to shoot subjects that are partially lit. And here, monochrome complements the simplicity of the composition. So I think simple compositions and black and white often go really well together. I'm best known for my minimalist work. And so it's kind of a natural thing for me to use black and white because those two things go together so well. Here, light and curves are the point of the photo. And so monochrome makes sense to me. So here is the monochrome, and I really notice the light along that ruffled edge of the leaf. And in black and in color, it's there, but it doesn't stand out the same way. So I just felt that monochrome was a much better choice for this particular image. This is just a simple tulip stem and leaf. And I was drawn to the way the light was hitting it and the shadow. and the lines and the curves. So in this color one, it's fairly clear what the subject is. You look at that and you've got a pretty good sense this is some kind of plant because of the green. When I turned it to black and white, the light and shadow and the lines and curves stand out more and the image becomes more abstract. You might not, if you hadn't seen the color one and you looked at this, you might not know what it was right away. And I kind of like that. I have a slight preference for the monochrome in this particular case. You may feel differently, and that's fine. It really comes down to a matter of taste. But if you're going to do black and white, you want to do black and white for a reason, not just because it looks cool or because it's trendy. You want to do it for a reason, like in this case, that it brings out the lines and curves more. Even with colorful flowers, monochrome can help us see things that we might otherwise overlook. So this blossom on the left is a rhododendron, and it was red. But what I loved about it when I looked at the plant before I shot it was the little very delicate ruffled edge on these emerging petals. I thought that was just so beautiful. And so I knew right away I wanted that to be monochrome so that people would notice those ruffles. And on the right, we have an orchid, and very often I do shoot orchids in color because they can be quite lovely. But when you take the color away, you notice the textures more, you notice the light more, and the patterns. You don't see a lot of abstract and altered reality pieces in black and white. I do a talk on abstract and altered reality, and I actually quite enjoy using monochrome when I'm doing that kind of work. Not always, I do color as well. But by using line and texture and pattern and shapes and light and contrast, we can make quite striking black and white abstracts. These images were both made from one image of a cut nautilus shell, and what drew me was the patterns, and then I did some mirroring and flipping and combining and so forth. But the image is really about patterns and light, and so color would not have added to that. And here we get a little crazier, a little bit of altered reality stuff. It's the same original nautilus shell shot that was the raw material for this. And so I played with it, obviously manipulated it, and then added a blue tint when I was finished. I wanted sort of a moonlighty kind of feeling. And to me, moonlight looks blue. So I gave it that. So it's a monochrome image. They're both monochrome images, but they're not black and white images. And again, I would have to be careful if I were entering them in a competition to make sure that it's allowed. So if you're going to learn to shoot black and white, you need to learn to see tones. And I remember several years ago, I had hired a photography coach on a few occasions. And at our last lesson, she said to me, Judy, you're doing great on composition. You've got, a number of things you're doing well. Now you need to work on seeing light. And that was her parting remark as I went out the door. And I thought, how the heck do I do that? It's a really important skill photographically in any kind of genre, but especially if you want to do monochrome. So you want to start by looking at light and shadows and thinking about contrast. The world is in color, but we need to learn to see the tones. So the left column of colors here is dark, what we would call a dark color. And then the next row over is a light color. And could you go lighter than that? Yeah, absolutely. You could keep going down and down and down in the amount of color mixed in with the white, and you have lighter and lighter colors. When we talk about a dark color and a light color, we are talking about tone. So, but it's hard to separate tone and color in your brain unless you practice at it. So we need to learn to see the tonality within the colors. And this is where putting your LCD screen on monochrome can help you to do that. Even though you're still shooting raw, your LCD screen can be set on most cameras to show you a black and white JPEG preview of what you're looking at. A good understanding of light and shadow helps us make better photos generally, but especially in black and white. So to train myself, what I did was I started off by looking for shadows. Forgot about the light, just looked for shadows. And particularly really sharp shadows like this in hard light. These agave plants were shot in direct Arizona sun. And so you get those very sharp edged shadows, and we call this hard light. And this can be very dramatic. And it's easier sometimes to see these kinds of shadows. And I'm sure in Florida, you get lots of bright sun. So you can see these kinds of hard edged shadows that are characteristic of hard light. So start looking for that and train yourself to see them. And then when you've done that, look for the softer shadows, the softer edges, which are the result of soft diffused light. So if you have an overcast day or a day when there's some cloud, go out and look around and look for shadows. They'll be different than they were in the bright sunshine, but you can train yourself to notice the quality of the light, whether it's hard or soft, and the direction of the light. So, see the shadow on the wall, but also notice the areas of light and shadow throughout the image. There are lighter and darker areas of the shadow itself, and there's lighter and darker areas in the subject. So you don't need your camera to do this. You can practice this anywhere, anytime. The other thing that you need to understand and remember is that your camera sees light differently than we do. And you need to experiment with that. So this was an experiment that I did. This is actually a photograph of a white sheet, but it's lit by very strong direct sunlight streaming in my bedroom window, which was creating shadows. And the shadows did not look like that. They weren't black, but they were gray. And when I went to take a photograph, of course, I needed to expose so that I wouldn't blow the highlights out, because the bright sunshine hitting white fabric is pretty darn bright. And by the time I dropped my exposure enough to get the highlights to not blow out, the shadows went very dark. So this is a good thing to play with, folks. Go into your bedroom, mess up your bed, and take pictures. You will learn about how your camera sees light differently than you do. I want to talk about processing black and white. I'm always surprised how many really fine photographers don't understand how to process black and white. And there are a number of ways to do it. I'm not going to say that my way is the best way, but it's the best way for me, and you might find that it is for you too. I'm going to show you some things in Lightroom, but what I show you is going to apply to other applications too. So I have used On1 Photo Raw, I've used Topaz, I've used Photoshop. Most of the programs out there will have a similar control panel for black and white to what I'm going to show you. Most people, when they start out with black and white, they figure, well, you just take away the color, right? You just slide that saturation slider all the way over to the left and you got black and white. Well, that's true. You do have black and white, but you are stuck with what you've got. You have so much less capacity to create an image that conveys your vision. It's easy, but there's no control over the tonality based on the colors. It throws away the color information. And so please don't do this. There are much better ways. So here we have some colors across the top here and two different conversion methods here. So the top method, this first black and white strip has just been desaturated in Lightroom. I did what I just told you you should never do, and I dragged that slider all the way to the left, and that's the end result, and that's what you get. What you see is what you get, you're done. The bottom strip of black and white gives very, very similar results with only some minor differences, but this was done with a slider method, and all the sliders set at 0. And we're going to get into this a little bit more. I'll actually demonstrate this for you. If you're not following it completely, you'll get it in a minute. But with the slider method, you can adjust each tone, each color, the tonality of each color separately. So if you look carefully, I don't know if you can see it, but this blue here is one shade of gray when it's done with desaturation. It's a little bit lighter shade of gray when it's done with a true neutral black and white conversion. The differences are subtle, but they are there. In Lightroom, there is a profile browser, and you can go to the monochrome profiles, and you can see these are all different black and white interpretations of that same strip of color that I was showing you. So you can see that there's a lot of difference. You know, here we've got, this is almost completely black, and over here it's very gray. So we can choose a profile. Now, I don't usually. I did try it the other day when I was preparing this presentation, and yes, I can see why some people might like to use the profiles, but that's not how I do it. This is how I do it. And every program pretty much has some sliders like this. You go to the black and white section of your processing, and you can slide your sliders. So my usual method in Lightroom is I'll very quickly press the V key on my keyboard, and that will show me a black and white of the image. And if it looks half decent, then I might pursue it. And if it just goes muddy and I don't think it's going to make it good black and white, I just press V again and it takes me back to the color. But if I do proceed, then I go into these sliders and I tweak each color until I have the tones that I wanted. And there's a special tool in Lightroom, and I think there's one in On One, and I'm not sure about the others. This little tool that looks like sort of a bullseye is called the targeted adjustment tool. And what that lets you do, you click on it, and then you go over to your image, your color image. And once you change it to black and white, I hit the V key. And then you click and drag on the color you want to adjust. And that will adjust that color to be a darker tone in black and white or a lighter tone in black and white. And you can adjust each color separately. And I'm going to show you this when we go into Lightroom in a minute or two. What we see as green often contains a lot of yellow. So if you've got a picture of trees, you might think you just need to move the green slider, but actually there's a lot of yellow in there too. So you need to adjust both. And the targeted adjustment tool lets you do both at the same time. Caucasian skin tones often contain red, orange, and yellow. So when you change a picture of a person to black and white, then you need to adjust all three of those. And I'm going to show you how to do that. The top one, the top black and white strip is I've hit the auto button on the black and white adjustment, and that's fine. You can do that, see if it works. Sometimes it might. The bottom one, I've moved the sliders manually. Can make any color, any tone within limits. So here's the way I adjusted the sliders for this bottom one. I've moved them around quite a bit just to demonstrate how you can change the tonality of different colors. You can use a gradient map in Photoshop to make black and whites, and some people swear by that. I find that much more complicated to customize, and so that's not how I do it. I do sometimes use DxO's Silver Effects Pro. I think it's an excellent plugin. And it actually might be a really good way for you to get started because there's so many different presets to give you an idea of what's possible. And then you can tweak the sliders for each one of those presets and create your own presets and come up with something that really conveys your vision. So there are many ways to convert to black and white, and these are just a few examples. But as I say, my favorite way is to use the black and white sliders in Lightroom or sometimes Silver Effects Pro. I want to talk a little bit about color grading. As I mentioned, in monochrome, you can only use one color for tinting. And if you use more than one, then it's no longer monochrome. So here's an example. This is an old mining assay shack from Jerome, Arizona, which is a ghost town. And I thought that because it was an old building and old machinery, that black and white in an old style would work well. So, I would say 95% of my monochrome work is done in Lightroom. And you can do the same thing in Adobe Camera Raw if that's what you prefer to use. The other 5% is pretty much done in Silver Effects Pro or On One Photo Raw. It also has some really wonderful black and white presets. But as I've said, I will desaturate them in Lightroom afterwards if I'm entering a competition and make sure that I don't have more than one hue. Here's an abstract where it is a black and white photograph, but I've added a purple tint to the midtones at 100% saturation. So you would not look at that and think, oh, that's a black and white toned image, but this is an example of what you can do with that. This is an old slinky that I shot with a flash, and I could have got this effect by using colored gels on my flash, since the slinky is gray and the backdrop was black, but I didn't do it that way. I shot it as a normal raw file and then turned it black and white, and then I color graded it or split toned it with purple. And I applied 100% purple, 100% saturation of purple to the shadows, to the highlights, and 90% to the shadows. The same shade of purple, though. It has to be the same shade exactly, the same number on the color wheel. And the midtones I left untoned so that we'd have the light showing that way. And then I like to play, so I used the same toning and then just did some manipulation to make it kind of fun. Again, this is a monochrome image. It's a double exposure of an ice cube, actually. And it was toned blue to suggest the cold. And in this case, I used a blue at 68% saturation. This image was not shot at night. This is a daytime image that I've manipulated to change it to give it a nighttime look. So I took the original photograph, I turned it black and white, and then I added a night sky shot in the same area that the church was taken, and then tinted the shadows just 14% saturation of blue, just to give it that hint of moonlight. And I often will use a blue tint when I'm doing a night shot. And then, because I like to have fun and be a little crazy, this is another one of the shots that I created out of that Nautilus shell. And again, the stormy, I call this one Storm, and blue tint goes nicely for that stormy feeling. It's got a cold look and kind of a sense of mystery in it. Let's talk a little bit about low key and high key. I do a whole separate presentation on this, but I can give you some hints on how to play with this. So high key is an image that is mostly light tones and low contrast. So typically your histogram for a high key image will have very little or nothing to the left of center, and all the tones will be to the right of center in the highlights and the whites. And low key is mostly dark tones, and it's high contrast. So there's two things to think about: the level of contrast and the predominance of tones. You can do high key and low key in color, but you really don't see it in color all that often. I find it more powerful in monochrome, and it's much more common to see high key and low key in monochrome. Normally, I shoot specifically for high key and low key, but these images were both made from the same original raw file. The light and shadow were reversed in the second one, and I've done some other manipulations so that I got that high contrast for the second one. I really love high key. To me, there's an elegance to it, a simplicity, a gentleness to high key. And I think it's really well suited to flowers and to subjects that are elegant or simple or gentle. So it's often used for portraits of girls and women, for example. And again, the monochrome, I think, lets the curves and the form take center stage, and there's no color to distract. So this is mostly bright tones and low contrast. If you looked at the histogram, it would be mostly off to the right. Again, here we've got mostly bright tones and low contrast. So these are high key images. And more in the last couple of years, I've been shooting with ETTR, which stands for exposed to the right. And what that means is that you expose as bright as you can without blowing the highlights. So your histogram will just barely touch the right-hand edge. And it may look like it's overexposed, but as long as you haven't blown the highlights, it's not overexposed. You may want to adjust some tones, but that's what ETTR is shooting that way. And then if I'm doing sort of a normal exposure shot, I'll bring the exposure down in Lightroom. The reason I prefer to bring my exposure down rather than up is because when I take my exposure up in post, it introduces noise. Whereas if I expose to the right and I take the exposure down a little bit, it doesn't produce more noise. So I'm doing this not just for high key now, I'm doing it for pretty much everything now. And this is what the histogram for this tulip stem looks like. You can see that if you look at the middle of the histogram, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, there is nothing at the 50% mark, at the middle gray mark. Everything is over to the right-hand side of the histogram. And there is a bit of a spike here. You don't normally want a spike. The reason you have a spike there is because I've got a white background. And there are areas of that background that it's fine with me if that goes to pure white. Here we've got a calla lily done in high key, not quite as many, I'm sorry, a little bit more of the darker tones, but still very little if you look at the histogram. And the light and the subtle shadows reveal the form of it. And then the orchid, you've got this playful interplay of light and shadow. I think that high key is well suited to shooting images that involve youth and innocence and purity. I would say that the image on the right is more high key than the one on the left because it has fewer dark tones in it. It's difficult to shoot high key portraits of people with dark hair. But if you've got a subject with gray hair or blonde hair or red hair, it can make really nice high key images. I've shot older women. I have a friend who's 71 and her mother is 90. And I shot a picture of the two of them together and I did it in high key and turned out very nicely. So these are two images from the same raw file. This is the raw file I used to make some of those wild and crazy ones. The one on the left is not high key or low key. There's too much contrast in it for it to be high key. Remember, high key is low contrast. And there's not enough darkness to be low key. But I took that same raw file and processed it in a different way. And I could process it for the shell to be darker, and that makes the whole image a low key image. So generally, when I do this, I've exposed to the right. I generally will lower the exposure till it looks about right and lower the shadows and the blacks and then raise the whites, because in low key, you do need to have some white or almost white to provide contrast. So here's another example. This one's been toned with, this is my signature tone. I like this tone for a lot of what I do. So low key is mostly dark tones, but the light tones to provide the contrast. This was shot with a bare flash with a dark flower and a dark background. And it gives a sort of a sense of drama and sensuality in this. This could be considered an abstract photograph. The curves and the form are more important than the actual subject here. The subject is actually a calla lily laying on its side, but I've had people look at this and say, oh, that looks like a manta ray. So it has become quite abstract. Here again, the curves and the light and the texture are the point. And these are both low-key images. They've got mostly dark tones and then some light tones to create contrast. This is another example of a shot that was taken during the day and then turned into a nighttime shot by manipulating the tonality. So turned black and white and then toned, and I've applied a bit of a paint effect to this one. So again, mostly dark, but light tones to create high contrast. And there's a feeling of mystery and maybe even menace. Like if you were designing a movie poster for a murder mystery, you would not use a high key image, right? Because it's light tones and it's associated with that sort of innocence. But if you do a low key image of the bad guy, that's got a sense of mystery and menace, and it's got a whole different feeling. And this was a low-key shot of some antique bottles shot with a flash off to the left and behind the bottles. I wanted the shapes and the forms and the texture here. And again, it's mostly dark tones with some highlights to create some high contrast. So you can see that there's a lot more to making good black and white images than just taking away the color. And so I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and then I'm going to start up Lightroom, and it's going to look like I'm not looking at you because I'm going to be looking at my other screen, which is larger. And I'm going to show you some of how this works in Lightroom. So I'll stop sharing for a minute. And I'll quit my PowerPoint presentation and then share my screen again. Oh, I guess I better start up Lightroom first. Okay, good. And I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, tell me, Ernie or Mervyn or somebody.
Yeah, we see your Lightroom.
Okay, excellent. Great. Okay. So just to give you an idea of how this slider business works, here's a picture that I took off the internet just simply because it had lots of colors in it. So if I hit my D key for develop, if I go down to, if I hit black and white, or I hit the V key, it turns it to black and white. And it's not a very interesting black and white. But the trick is to go down here to where it says black and white and start playing with these sliders. So if I take the reds dark, you can see what happens as I do that. Any of the blocks that have red in them start to get dark. If I reset that, do the same with orange. There's orange in all three of those. We'll do it with yellow. Didn't know you could make yellow black, but you can. And the same with all of these. And we could go the other way. We could take blue and make them bright. And so you can see that by manipulating these sliders, you can start to really have a lot of control over what your tones look like. That's a far cry from just that. And this is the power of black and white processing, that you can take control and be creative and make your picture look the way you want it to look. So if we go back here, here's an example of a shot where you probably want to keep that in color because it's about color, right? It's about those red leaves. And if I hit my V key and have a quick peek at what it looks like in black and white, it looks terrible. And even if I start playing with those sliders, it still doesn't look great. But why would I even want to turn that black and white? It's a lovely fall picture. Go to something like this. This is in the Canadian Rockies near Banff, and beautiful scene. Now, I'm not going to tell you can't do landscapes in black and white because, I mean, Ansel Adams, right? And there's lots of other people. I don't know if you know Cole Thompson's work, but he does some beautiful, beautiful work. Landscapes, almost always black and white. But there's an awful lot of detail in here. There's a lot of detail in the branches of the trees. And if I go to black and white, doesn't really do it for me. And I could play with the sliders and make things different, but there's just so much busyness in the picture. I often will not use black and white if I have a really busy picture. This is about 5 minutes from where I live. And again, a beautiful fall scene. Just completely loses all its appeal to me if I go to black and white. And again, I could start adjusting sliders, but doesn't look as good even when I do adjust the sliders. I'm going to go back to this picture here because I wanted to show you the targeted adjustment tool. I forgot to do that. So this is the targeted adjustment tool here under the black and white area. We're going to hit the V key to turn it black and white. And I want you to watch the sliders. As I click this and go over here and I land on a color, an area of color. And if I move up, that tone gets lighter. Now watch the sliders. You can see the blue sliders going up, but so did the purple one. They move together. And as I take them down, they move together. So this is a more accurate way of getting your colors to change. Go to red. Where was the red? Red's over here. I get that target adjustment and go over here to the red. Again, we got more than one slider moving. See that? The red and the orange are moving together. And if I had a tree, I would bet you $100 that the yellow and green would move together, most trees. I'm going to skip that one. Here's a forest scene. And I think if we go to black and white on this one, there's actually some potential here for a decent black and white. I would work with the sliders. Look at the, well, I was talking about trees a minute ago. Let's go to the tree and see what happens when we start moving this. Can you see the yellow and the green are moving together? So I can play with those. Then I could go over here and grab some of the brown on the tree and I could bring that down. And I'm starting to create some contrast. And I can still go to my basics panel and I can still play with, you know, highlights and shadows and create what I want to. But I've got the capacity to do that if I use those sliders. Here's the image you saw, or one of that series, where to me, that's an ugly color for a flower. But as soon as I press the V key, oh my goodness, now that starts to look much nicer. And if I go over to my black and white panel here and I start taking the green down and the yellow down, now I'm creating some lovely contrast. To me, that's a much more appealing image than having it in color. This one I played with because it is a simple image. And remember, I said that often a simple image will make a nice black and white. But when I did this one, it just didn't do it for me anymore. And I could play with it, make the boat really dark and the water even lighter. But I just thought, you know what? The blue is a serene color and that fits with the mood of what I'm trying to convey. So I'm going to leave that one in color. This is a foggy shot. Where was this shot? This is about 5 minutes from my house too. And I think the fog can bring out color in a way if it's not too foggy. And so I quite liked it in color, but I'll hit that V key just to see what the possibilities might be. And I know I can tweak beyond that, but it gives me an idea. This obviously is going to stay in color. I mean, you could do it in black and white, but why would you? This one actually, the color is lovely, but it wasn't the color that I loved about it. And so I actually really like this in black and white because all of a sudden, all these little lines and veins in the flower really stand out. And I can go in with my targeted adjustment tool. I can make those purples a little darker. I can make the greens and yellows a little bit lighter or darker, whatever I want to do. And so this one is one where I think I like them equally, whether they're in black and white or color. So there is a certain amount of personal taste. This one, definitely got to keep that one in color because what I fell in love with here was the colors and how they went together. Yes, the curves are beautiful, and they do stand out more when you do this, but I would tweak those colors and tones to make it even more dramatic. But in this case, I would stay with color. Here is, I think I showed you this one in the slideshow, and definitely black and white for me on this one. And again, I can go to the targeted adjustment tool and I can drag my greens and yellows up and down to get the look I want. I mean, you can make a really ugly black and white too, but what I love is that you have control to fulfill your vision, the process to communicate your vision. This one I would leave in color. I like the color. This is Portland Headlight in Maine, but it not bad in black and white either. And again, I could go in and I could make this roof either quite dark or very bright. And it's just a matter of what I want it to look like. And the sky, I can make the sky dark and I can make it almost disappear in white. You do have to be careful with your skies. If you go too crazy, sometimes doesn't look good. Although I have seen some of Cole Thompson's work where he's got very black skies and it's beautiful. So it's a matter of taste. Now, people are one of the things I struggled with when I was learning about black and white, because skin tones are tricky. And I've seen a lot of bad black and white people shots, and I made a lot of bad black and white people shots. If I just hit the V key and do a, I can actually make a virtual copy because I don't want to mess that up. If I hit the V key and make that a black and white photograph, look at her skin. It just looks terrible. It just looks muddy. But if I take my targeted adjustment tool and click on her skin and start raising, now I'm starting to get a prettier kind of look. And I've actually created, here you can see I've got plus 49 on the red and plus 51 on the orange. I've made those much lighter tones. I have a couple of presets that I've made for Caucasian skin. Here's one, and here's another one. And I will use one of those as my starting point. Just depends on the photograph. This one's a little bit darker. This one's a little lighter. So I'll often start with one of my own presets, but then I'll go over here and I'll tweak that until I like the way the skin looks. But by doing a regular black and white conversion like that, the skin just looks bad. Same thing here. My handsome husband here that I did a portrait of, if I go with the V key, that doesn't look very good. But if I use one of my presets and then tweak from there, I can get a nicer look. So here the skin is mostly red and orange, and I've taken up the red plus 26 and the orange plus 41, and it's given me a much nicer black and white. So if you want to do black and white portraits, pay attention to the skin because it often will not look good on an automatic conversion. This is an image of a hummingbird, and if you go to black and white with that, it's different, right? It depends on what I want you to look at. Do I want you to take in the color and the iridescence? Actually, I do. So I left this one in color. But if I go to black and white, I can tweak those tones individually, and you start to pay attention more to the texture and the lines and the patterns in the feathers. So again, it depends on what you want to do. Here's one where I quite like the color, but by going to black and white, it also makes a good image because it's making the light stand out more. Here, the color kind of steals center stage. The light is nice, but I think the light is more striking here. Again, personal taste, but there are possibilities. This is a photo of an old Duesenberg, and if we turn it to black and white, it just doesn't look good, right? There's not enough contrast. It's just kind of muddy. But if I get my targeted adjustment tool and I go over here to the cream colored paint and move it up, now it's starting to sing. And you can see that it moved the red down slightly and it moved the orange and yellow up, moved some green. So I've got a much better photograph now. But the original, just normal, neutral black and white mix just looks dingy. So start with a straight, normal black and white mix, but then play until you get the look that you want. This is kind of a fun shot, and I think I like it in color, but you could also go to black and white. Again, hitting the V key. Now you see the texture and the lines and so forth more than you did in the other one. So personal taste. This one, I would never turn this black and white. Cole Thompson might, but I probably wouldn't, because to me, it's about the color and the way the color is just washing the water and turning everything that beautiful orange. Here's a landscape that I haven't done a lot with in black and white, but you actually could, because we've got some interesting texture and we've got this leading line of white. And if we play with the whites and the tones a little bit, we can make that stand out. So if I take my targeted adjustment tool to an area of blue, and if you forget where the blue is, you just hit V again and you go, oh yeah, that's where it is. And you go back and I can pull those blues down. Now, of course, it's going to affect the blues in the whole photograph. Maybe I like how this looks on the water, but I don't like how it looks over here on the mainland mountains. Then I could do 2 different copies, make 2 virtual copies, process one for the water and one for the background. And then I could take those 2 copies into Photoshop, layer them, and mask them so that I have a different black and white interpretation on each one. And I thought I had a picture here for you guys of something else I was going to show you, but I guess it's gone. But here's a good example. If I wanted the roof to be dark, let's say the roof dark, light, and the stripes on the flag dark, I can't do that in Lightroom. At least not that I'm aware of. Somebody out there, well, actually, you probably could now with the new masking tools. But the other way to do it would be to turn the picture into black and white, adjust one of them so that you've got your roof, probably your roof real light, but watch the flag. As I'm adjusting the roof, watch the flag. You almost lose those stripes. So I could do one like that, save it, do another one like this, where I've got the stripes and the flag the way I want them, and then put the 2 together in Photoshop and mask the parts in that I want. Took me a while to figure that out. I always thought, geez, I've got red over here that I want dark and red over there that I want light, and how am I going to do that? So that's what I have to show you tonight. And I see there appear to be some questions in the chat. So I'm going to stop my sharing and go to that. I'm going to quit Lightroom because it tends to slow Zoom down.
Okay.
And,
So let me look at the questions we have in the chat. Okay, so let's start. Okay, all right. So beautiful work. Do you often shoot for low-key or low-key, and what type of images in your consideration are good candidates?
yeah, I think I've answered that. Anything where you want mystery, malevolence, sexiness, you probably want to go low-key. If you want innocence, elegance, purity, feeling of lightness, then you might go high-key. And some images just don't suit either one.
So the next question is, can you discuss the process you use in converting your color images to black and white? And I think you just did that.
Yep, just showed you that.
Okay.
In fact, I think I've answered all the ones in the chat. So maybe if people have a question or a comment or maybe a different way of doing things than I do it, jump in and share that with us.
All right.
I was told, can I just make one comment? I was told early in my photography career that by definition, black and white is abstract because we see in color. And once you've created a new version, it has to be abstract. So black and white by definition is abstract. And I like what you did with it in your version of it. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't quite see it that way, Robert, but I do say that I do refer to black and white as altered reality.
Okay.
You know, abstract to me is something where you can't tell what the thing is. But I take your point. It is not a reflection of the real world as we see it. Yeah.
On your last photo, you might be able to use blend modes to get that flag back.
That's a good point. Yeah, that gets a little more complicated, but yes, Bill, that is a way to do it.
Judy, have you used infrared?
I have not. I have an infrared preset or two in a couple of my programs, but I just don't care for infrared. I don't care for the infrared look most of the time. It doesn't interest me, so I don't play with it. Other people love it and they do it well, and bless them, let them do it.
Thanks.
All right. Do we have any other questions for?
Do you use flash or natural light more on your flowers?
I used to use just natural light, and more I'm using flash because I like control. I want to determine where that light is going to go. And window light is gorgeous. I do still sometimes use it, but I have an umbrella, I have a strip box, I have various ways of diffusing light, because I set out to try to emulate window light and make a shot that you would say, oh, that's window light. And I'd say, no, I used a softbox. I wanted to learn that skill. And when I say window light, I'm talking about diffuse window light. You don't want direct sunlight, but window light from like a north window is gorgeous.
Many of your black and white backgrounds were very dark. Do you use either masking, or do you actually create black and white backgrounds?
A little bit of both. I do as much as I can in camera. I have one of those black foam core trifold displays like the kids use for science fairs. And then I will often clamp a piece of black velvet over the back of it, because velvet really sucks light in and gets dark. And sometimes I'll put another black card over the top of it so that it's a really dark background. There's no light hitting it. If I need to, I will do some dodging and burning in my post-production.
What about a flash to get the black background?
Yes. Yes, I do that quite a bit. Yeah. That's how that calla lily on its side that looks like a manta ray, that's how that one was done.
All right. Any other questions for Judy? Judy, it was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Hopefully, maybe next year we'll bring you back.
Thank you for having me. I'd love to come back and see you again.
All right.
Have fun playing with it,
Thank
folks.
you.
And remember black and white when you're getting your pictures ready for the competition on patterns.
Yep.